Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Cross Culture Podcast, where we engage culture with Christ by addressing culture's biggest problems and questions from a biblical perspective. We want to let the gospel be a voice within culture in order to transform culture into kingdom culture. Today, we are, in this episode, looking over controversial passages in the Bible. We're looking at different texts that people commonly go to and point towards to try to indict God or paint a immoral picture of God or maybe of Christians, and maybe even show inconsistencies in the Bible or why we can't trust something. And so I'm excited to bring Justin back on the podcast, and we're going to be going through some different controversial passages and looking at them in context and exploring them further, and really looking at what do they really say about who God is, and how can we look at these passages truthfully in light of what people commonly say about them. And so thanks for joining us again on the podcast. I'm really excited for this episode. We've been talking about it for a while. So what passages, or what passage do you want to start with that you brought with you for this episode?
Yeah, so the first one that I want to talk about is one that me and you have had many conversations about, I know. And it's one that really intrigued me when I first started reading the Bible. And it's Matthew chapter 10. We can pull it up
go
here.
there real quick. Yeah, Matthew chapter 10.
Yeah, and specifically starting in verse 34, where it's Jesus talking, and Jesus says, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I came to turn a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a person's enemies will be members of his own household. The one who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and the one who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. The one who does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me, and the one who has found his life will lose it, and the one who loses his life for my sake will find it."
So this is not the all-inclusive Jesus in which we are familiar with in culture.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that so many people, when you ask them, like, what is the main point of the Bible? And they'll say, well, the main point is love. God is love. And whilst I agree that God is love, there's it's giving us guidelines to follow in life. And like, albeit here, it's a very interesting passage. God, like, Jesus he's not actually telling us to be violent. He doesn't mean violence by a sword. And actually the word there for sword that he uses in the Greek, it actually refers to like a large fishing knife, almost as if you were to scale a fish, a fillet knife. And so he's meaning division. He's coming to bring division among people, among families. And which
is contrary to how people usually think about Jesus. Like he's saying, I'm coming to bring division, not peace.
Yeah.
And yet we call him the Prince of Peace, and he's a peacemaker, and he tells us, blessed are the peacemakers, right? So it's like, this is something that a lot of people usually see and their eyebrows raise when they see this.
Yeah. And then we even see it like in Luke 14, he kind of recounts the same telling. And but Luke actually, he gives us like a picture of just hate. Like Jesus says, like, if you do not hate your mother or father, you cannot be my disciple. If you don't hate your family, you cannot be my disciple. And he's not actually telling us to hate our family like for no reason, just to follow him.
That would be a contradiction. Of the Ten Commandments.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You got to honor your mother and father. But pretty much he's saying, to be my follower, you are gonna face persecution. It's not an easy job to do. It's not an easy life to live. And like possibly even from your members of your own family.
Which Jesus experienced. Jesus is familiar with what it's like to do the will of the Father, do the will of God, and to experience division in his own family. His own family thought he was crazy. They wanted him to stop. They wanted him to come home. They didn't even believe in him until after his resurrection.
Yeah, exactly. And like what we actually see, like even earlier in the chapter, like the context behind it is this is him commanding his disciples to go out and, perform miracles and preach. And he's saying, like, you guys are going to have a hard road ahead of you. This is not going to be an easy thing to do. And he's saying, but if you want to follow me, this is what it looks like. This is what's going to happen to you, and this is what you must do. And, we look at things like that, and it's a very, very hard pill to swallow, I think. And, it's a very like hard thing to think about. Like, oh, like, do I really like turn away from my family if they, if they don't want to follow Jesus with me? And I think that we should all like, have those conversations with our family, and we should try to bring everybody to Christ. But ultimately, you shouldn't let even members of your own family turn you away from him.
Yeah. What happens when following Jesus gets you denounced by your mom or dad, or gets you kicked out of the household, or you stop getting invited to family gatherings, or you're the one that everyone gangs up against in the conversations with the family.
Yeah. We actually see it's a very common thing among other religions. If you leave another religion for Christianity, it's a very common thing to be, disowned by your family, kicked out, mistreated. Specifically with people leaving Islam and Judaism. My wife, at her former job, back where we used to live, she had a coworker who's a Messianic Christian, Messianic Jew. So she's ethnically Jewish, born in Israel, raised in Israel, came over and became a U.S. citizen later in life, and she converted to Christianity. And her family, who's still largely in Israel, no communication with her. No, the only person that really communicates with her still is her brother. I mean, when the attacks happened on October 7th, she had no idea any contact with them. She had to get contacted by her brother like months later to find out that they were okay. So it's like, yeah, there's really people that you and I know, that people we know who have experienced division in their family specifically because of their belief in Jesus. And people across the world throughout history have experienced that. That's a wild story. Yeah.
It's intense. It's hard to think about in our society, in our culture, in a lot of ways, the idea of a family unit being heavily affected by one person's decision religiously or who to follow. That's not something we're as accustomed to in an individual society. But that's why households in the New Testament, anytime someone's converted, a lot of times we see that the household's converted. Why? Because it was a big deal. It's like you don't make a decision like that without really consulting with the household, communicating with the household. That's why I think Jesus understands, like, to follow me, this is not just something that affects you in your life. Like, this could affect other people to the degree of where, they might not want anything to do with you.
And I think the ultimate goal of Christianity is unity, right? Like, we want to get everybody to heaven.
Unity with God,
Yeah, but to start that, Jesus basically, he has to reform the way we think. He has to come in. He's saying, in order to do that, we must first, break down the structure. We must first divide before we could all be united in Christ. There's not, and he even says, there's going to be people that hate you for believing this. That's the cost.
Yeah, and I'm sure there was people in Jesus's lifetime that would have accused him of being a divisive person. Just with the contentions with the Pharisees, with the different Jewish religious leaders and teachers of the time. I mean, his miracles on the Sabbath and his location of miracles, his timing of miracles, it would have been very easy to accuse him of being divisive. So I like what he's doing here by almost leaning into that, embracing it, but by identifying the truth of the gospel, that it's a divisive good news. It's a good news that pierces the soul. I mean, like Acts 2:37, right? They were cut to the heart. That's that sword that if it's going to pierce our heart, it might actually divide our life and change our life. It's not just an internal change when God comes into our life. It's a practical behavioral change, habit change, environment change. And so a lot of times when we change, people might not like that. Man, that's good. A lot of times we don't think of Jesus as being controversial, but very much so.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like, you read it for the first time, you're like, wow, like I had no idea Jesus said that, stuff like that.
Hate your mother.
Yeah. But it's like, I saw an analogy for it one time where it's like, Jesus, like he's not specifically telling us to, hate our families, but I saw an analogy where it's like if you have a dog, right? And if you have a dog and you love your dog, but then you have a child and you start a family with your wife, and your dog bites your child. You love your dog, but you love your child way more, right? So you'd have to make a decision, and you'd have to get rid of that dog, especially like if it continued to be violent. And it's not because you love the dog any less, but it's because you love your child way more. And just as like, we love our families a lot. Family is very important to us. They're, our mother and father, they gave us life, but ultimately we're only here because of God, and our ultimate allegiance should be to God and Jesus.
To know God and to make God known, and our ultimate allegiance is Jesus. And I think that's huge, because how many times are there things in my life, affections in my life, that Jesus has a desire to reign in my heart, but to do so would create conflict and friction with those other things. And family is included in that. Bloodline is included in that, very much so. I love that. Anything else on this one before moving to the next one?
I think we can go ahead and get into the next one.
Awesome. So the one that I brought, the first one that I brought is, it's in a couple of places. It's more going back to the Old Testament. I hear a lot of times people give God a hard time for the conquest language and the war language used in the conquest of the Canaanites from Deuteronomy or from Joshua. A lot of times people point out and they say, well, why would God command Israel to commit genocide on the Canaanites? And they point out how look at the language it's used. It's he's wiping them out. He's annihilating them. I mean, Deuteronomy 7:1, God tells them, you must destroy them totally. Make no treaty with them. In chapter 7, verse 16, just a couple of verses later, you must destroy all the peoples the Lord your God gives over to you. Deuteronomy 20, 16 through 18, you shall save alive nothing that breathes, that they may not teach you to do according to all their abominable practices. Deuteronomy 2, 34, we utterly destroyed, or Harim, every city, men, women, and children. Deuteronomy 3:6, we devoted them to destruction, as we did to Sihon. And then in Joshua, chapter 6 and 17 and 21, in verse 17, it says, the city and all that is within it shall be devoted to the Lord for destruction. And then Joshua 6:21, they devoted to destruction all in the city, both men and women, young and old. Joshua 10:40, Joshua struck the whole land. He left no survivor. Man, that's a lot of verses where people look at that and they go, wow, like, is that the same God that we see in the New Testament? Is that the same Jesus? Like, is Jesus God? Like, what is going on here? This is very controversial. People commonly paint God as a moral monster because of his command to commit genocide, apparently. But I think it's worth looking at these and having a conversation about these. And oftentimes these are viewed as genocidal language or literal commands to kill and wipe out everybody. But I think there's a couple of reasons why we should hesitate or be hesitant to view them in that way. And hopefully people, if you're watching this, I encourage you to go back and look at some of this yourself. Some really good books on this would be like Dr. Paul Copan. He wrote, Is God a Moral Monster? That's a really, really good book. Paul David Tripp, I believe, he wrote a book, David Lamb. David Lamb wrote a book called God Behaving Badly, and he also writes on this. So I really encourage you, go read those books. We'll put the links in the description. I'll even put an overlay on the screen so you can see what they look like. But first and foremost, I think it's best to look at these as hyperbolic, ancient, Near Eastern war language. Ancient Eastern smack talk. That's ultimately what this is. Like, total destruction language was standard military talk of ancient Near Eastern nations. Phrases like destroyed all or left no survivor, men and women and young and old. These are stock expressions used in ancient Near Eastern victory accounts. They functioned as theological and political propaganda, not literal census reports. In other words, it's not wise, I think, to view these as hyper-literal commands. Dr. Paul Copan, he writes that such language was part of the conventional rhetoric of warfare, not a precise literal description of events. We see this in ancient Near Eastern war texts. I mean, with the Egyptian pharaoh, Merneptah, it'll write that Israel is laid waste, its seed is no more. And yet, what do we know about Israel? Israel continued on and existed. That's not the case. The Moabite stone, it says Israel has utterly perished forever. It's claiming total annihilation, but that's not the case. And I mean, we even use this today. I mean, you're a sports fan. What happens in sports? Like what happened last night between the 49ers and the Seahawks?
They were destroyed.
They were
completely destroyed.
Utterly laid waste. I mean, annihilated, left no survivors, a total bloodbath, right? We could go on and on and on about all the different ways we express total domination.
If you're not going to be at your best against this team, they will punish you. And punish the Bucs, yes, they did. If you're not going to guard him, I mean, he's going to score. Come on. Just going to kill you. They destroyed the Bucs.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's like I think the number one thing that we can point to prove that is that we see these people later on in the Bible too. They pop back up, like the Moabites. They pop back up. The Amalekites, like they're obviously not completely destroyed, but ultimately like they want to like neuter them. They want to wipe them out. They want to get rid of their military strength.
Yes. I mean, that's the harem. That's the language that's used. The actual word harem. It's this idea of a ban. The ban. It's the removal of military and religious threat. And it's not an ethnic ban. It's not an ethnic cleansing. It is a military conquest.
And it's not for no reason either. Like he's using his people of Israel to judge the people around them. And when you look at the Bible, these people they're practicing demon worship. They're worshiping false gods. They're sacrificing their children. Blood sacrifices. And he's does our all powerful God not have the right to judge us? Does he have the right to judge?
And that's
other
the
people?
thing. This is like not only trying to drive out the pagan gods and their deities, but it's also a judgment against those deities and against those pagan practices. We don't see Israel in the conquest of Canaan. There's not some like imperial expansion that is ongoing after that. It's not like in Islam where there's this ongoing expansion of conquest where they're trying to gain land and just grow and grow and grow. In fact, when Israel in the Bible, what happens to them when they do go to war and they do conquest against God's authority when God did not permit them
God
to?
punishes them.
God punishes them.
He sends another country in to judge them.
Yeah, exactly. So God is authorized, as you were saying, to judge a sinful nation who has been sinful for hundreds of years. I mean, people ask all the time, why doesn't God stop evil? Well, sometimes God does stop evil, and he uses non-perfect nations like Israel, imperfect nations, to go in and judge that nation. And we see that Israel's not above reproach or judgment. They're judged as well for their own sin, on their own timing. So, And
it's not as if it was just a random thing either. Like God gave these countries hundreds of years to change their ways.
Yep.
And we see it multiple times too. It's like, oh, well, like, why is God doing this? He's not even giving them a chance. Like, and we see it in Exodus too. Why would God harden Pharaoh's heart? We see 7 times before God hardens Pharaoh's heart that Pharaoh hardened his own heart. He gives us plenty of time to change our own ways before he's going to judge us for not listening.
Yeah, I mean that's literally the moral context of this conquest and of these commands are not in a isolated vacuum. This is not just some random command that he gave arbitrarily out of nowhere. There's been hundreds of years of wickedness, of sin, and God's going to act. And I think he's right to do so. And I think we should be careful in thinking that God doesn't have the right to judge sin, or that God should be more patient than he is. God is very patient with us. Like the fact that we don't fail to wake up in the morning, right? Like God could decide to just stop us right now, right here. We're evil. We do evil things. I do evil things. And God is patient with me. And so I think God is very patient with evil nations throughout time. He was patient with Egypt. I mean, they enslaved his people for 400 years. He gives them warnings, plague after plague. Like they could have just taken his offer and
not suffer any plague.
Not suffer any plague, which is incredible to think. Like you could hold hostage someone's family for 400 years and he would still offer you that. And then, you have these you have Canaanites and the Amorites and the Hittites, all these people who are practicing really, really wicked things. And that's what he's commanding them to conquer, to conquest, to drive out that practice that way, to bring in not just an ethnic Israel, but the way of Yahweh, the way of the Lord. He wanted them to create a world in which reflected his image, and there was sin and pagan practices going on that was that needed to be judged.
Yeah, and look at what got God to the point of the flood too. He says that every single thought that humans had was sinful. That every thought that we had was evil, obviously with the exception of Noah. And so he wipes everybody out. He says, hey, we're going to completely reset. Like this is not the way that I want things to be.
Yeah. And so when we look at these texts, I think it's important to remember just a couple of things. I think first and foremost, we have to be mindful that this is more so hyperbolic war language that's emphasizing total destruction, total domination, total overthrow, not hyper literal genocidal commands. I also think it's important to remember that we even have modern examples of this. We see ancient examples of that. We see that, like you were saying, there's in the Bible itself, just a couple of chapters later, we see that the people in which are commanded to be totally wiped out or that are described as totally wiped out are not actually totally wiped out. They're very much so there. They're intermarrying with them. God is constantly referring to them in the text. And also the language itself, in when you look at the language, harem, it is emphasizing total military conquest, not ethnic conquest. It was limited, gradual, and restrained, and there was a moral context as well that has a backdrop of God's mercy and God's forgiveness and God's patience and God's authority to judge sin, which is historically what was happening with these nations.
And one more thing I want to bring up really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is specifically when it will say things like, oh, kill all the the men, women, and only keep the virgin women, and with those you can keep for yourselves. I want to make it very clear. Like God is not commanding the people of Israel, like, okay, you can have these women and they're going to be like your sex slaves, or like
that's the assumption we put on
you're able to violate them. Like no, their countries are completely wiped out militarily, and he's actually saying, okay, these people, like the ones who are innocent, the virgin women, you can actually take and you can assimilate them into your culture, and you can marry them. Like that's okay. It's actually to like protect. If you were to leave them there by themselves, what would happen to them? They would have been taken by another nation. They would have actually been completely wiped out by another nation or taken into slavery.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. These are what's called case laws. So commands or laws given in certain case scenarios. And what's a certain case scenario? Well, you just overthrew an entire pagan nation, and now it's implying that you weren't wiping out just the women, because now he's giving you a case law on how to treat the virgin women that are left over. And it's not just taking them as their own sex slave, it's actually assimilating them into Israel. And so, again, David Lamb talks a lot about this, and so does Dr. Paul Copan. We'll put the links of those books in the description, and we'll show it on the screen again, just so you can see what this looks like. The Canaanite conquest and conquest of the Bible, they reflect standard ancient Near Eastern hyperbolic war rhetoric, not literal genocide. We see that through internal biblical evidence, surviving Canaanite populations, direct parallels in non-biblical ancient Near Eastern texts, and interpretation strongly from people trustworthy like Dr. Paul Copan or David Lamb and others as well. So anything else left on that, or do you want to go to the next one?
Yeah, I think we're good to go to the next one.
Okay. So what do you want to go to yours, or do you want to go to the New Testament one in Acts as well? Which one do you want to do, or which one do you want to end with?
Yeah, we can go ahead and do your other one next. That's
okay.
fine.
We'll end with yours. That's fine. This next one, it's jumping to the New Testament. So the last one I wanted to look at some Old Testament controversial areas, around the war language that was used and the conquest and what that means about God, and who God is. This one, I really want to look at early church history, Acts chapter 5. The church was recently launched in Acts 2. We see at Pentecost, and they're really growing. They're facing some early persecution, but really they're overcoming all of that. They're getting through all of that. They're doing really well. They're growing and thriving in a lot of ways. But in Acts chapter 5, in the first 11 verses, we see something that's pretty interesting. And we can just go to Acts chapter 5 real quick and read that together. But this is the story of Ananias and Sapphira. So I'll just start in verse 1. Or do you have it? Do you have it?
I have it.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead and read it? Read 1 through 11.
Yeah. But a man named Ananias with his wife Sapphira sold a piece of property and kept back some of the proceedings for himself. With his wife's full knowledge and bringing a portion of it, he laid it at the apostles' feet. But Peter said, Ananias, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back some of the proceeds of the land? While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, was it not under your control? Why is it that you have conceived this deed in your heart? You have not lied to men, but to God. And as he heard these words, Ananias collapsed and died. A great fear came over all who heard about it. The young men got up and covered him, and after carrying him out, they buried him. Now an interval of about 3 hours elapsed, and his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. And Peter responded to her, tell me whether you sold the land for this price. And she said, yes, for that price. Then Peter said to her, why is it that you have agreed together to put the Spirit of the Lord to the test? Behold, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out as well. And immediately she collapsed at his feet and died. And the young men came in and found her dead, and they carried her out and buried her beside her husband. And a great fear came over the whole church and all who heard about these things.
Okay, so that's Acts chapter 5, 1 through 11. When you read that, if you're not a Christian or if you're hearing that for the first time, like what are some of your thoughts when you read that?
Yeah, like if I play any games at all with God, he's going to strike me dead right there. If I do anything to disobey God, he's going to strike me dead.
Yeah, so it's almost like, the picture. Have you ever seen like Bruce Almighty? The original one, not Evan Almighty, but the one with Jim Carrey?
No, I actually haven't.
You've never seen Bruce Almighty? Wow, guys, no. We got a moment on the podcast. Hold on. Okay, well, anyway, there's a scene where you've seen Evan Almighty, right?
I don't think so.
Oh, man. Okay, that's the next one. We're going to do a reaction video next time to these movies, and we got to make Justin watch them to prepare for it. But in the movie, Bruce is played by Jim Carrey. He's really upset at God. Things aren't going well in his life. And there's a moment where he's like in the rain, and he's like, smite me, almighty smiter. Yeah. Right? He has this, and it's emphasizing this idea that we view God as this God that's quick to just smite people dead. Like he's looking out to just try to kill everybody. And like, yeah, you read this story and you're like, wow, like God will smite me dead. But I think it's worth slowing down and looking at because historically speaking, this is the first example of corruption and abuse in the church. Would you say that's a relevant topic in today's culture?
Oh yeah, like I think we got many comments on our Why You Should Go to Church video talking about how like you don't need to go to church because churches are corrupted, and man has brought the church farther than it was ever supposed to be, away from God, and things like that.
Yeah, and a lot of times people will focus in on all the corruption in the church, which is a lot of times warranted. I understand that, but they carry with that emphasis an assumption about God as if God is okay with that, as if that's why I shouldn't go to church or have anything to do with God. So we blame God with the church. And I think in this story, I think it's worth looking at because what are the implications of God not acting in this situation? What's the implications of God not responding to the earliest case of corruption in the earliest church?
They would have perceived it as being permitted.
Yeah. They would have perceived it as being permitted. I think it would have set a bad example. It would have tarnished their witness. Ultimately, and this isn't just sin of like stealing money. This is sin of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
This is hypocrisy. Right before this happens, at the end of chapter 4, Barnabas is the one who sells all of his property, and he gives the proceeds to the church and the apostles so that they can provide the needs of people. And then in response, Ananias and Sapphira sell a piece of their property. And they go and they keep some of the proceeds, and they go and take the proceeds and said, hey, this is how much we sold it for. So on the surface, it looks like, oh, they're just keeping some of the money. It's stealing. But it's not. They're trying to persuade and present the idea that, like Barnabas, they have the generosity to sell their property and give all the proceeds away.
They were making it look as if they gave 100% of the proceeds to the church when they had kept some for themselves.
It was an intentional and deliberate deceit. And I think that's what is worth highlighting, is that when sin first enters the church, when hypocrisy first enters the church, God addresses it. And that's a huge deal, because like a lot of people slam the church today, slam Christians today for hypocrisy. And in a lot of ways that might be warranted, but they need to understand God is not okay with it, and he doesn't want to put up with it.
Yeah, I think we see really we do. We see so many examples of people abusing Christianity and doing bad things with authority in the church, and using Christianity to justify horrendous things. And I think it tells us that God is not okay with that. That is that's absolutely not okay. It's religious hypocrisy to do things like that.
And neither should Christians.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I mean. Like in the church, like people use it to justify so many terrible things. And this is God saying, hey, no, like I'm not okay with that. And even if people are able to get by with that, it will be judged one day.
Absolutely. And that's good news. I mean, and ultimately, remember what does Peter say to Ananias, or ask him essentially? What does he ask him in verse 3?
I don't have to. I just look back at it.
You're good. I got it right here. He says, Ananias, why has
Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit
and keep back some of the proceeds of the land? So what is the source of this hypocrisy and sin?
Greed. Yeah, Satan.
Satan's the one that's influencing this. So it's like, in a lot of ways, it's easy to look at this and be like, wow, why would God just kill Ananias and Sapphira for this one thing? We viewed it in an isolated way, but it's not God just judging Ananias and Sapphira. I think it's God judging Satan's influence and infiltration in the earliest church. And what is the church? Who is the church in relation to God?
It's us.
It's us. But who are we? We are his body, and we are his bride. So ask the question, does a husband not have the right to defend the purity and the integrity of his bride? He does. So God judging Ananias and Sapphira, it's not a personal thing. It's actually much more objective than what we look at it as. They think, oh, God's just going to smite me dead. Well, God has the authority to do what he wants, but at the end of the day, God takes very seriously the integrity of his people, the integrity of his bride. He wants his bride to be pure. And it was a willful thing they did. I mean, he tells them, while it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? After it was sold, was it not under your control? So he's basically saying, you sold it, you could have kept all of it. Like, there would have been no problem. It's not like, oh, you didn't give enough. It's you could have kept this for yourself, and there would have been no issue.
It's that you lied and tried to say that you gave 100% of it to God.
Yeah, which is a pretense. And a lot of people are like, they treat Peter as if he's like some mob lord sitting in a chair, like, why did you do this to me? But consistently, who is he saying to Ananias and Sapphira that they're sinning and lying and tricking and deceiving?
Yeah. You disobeyed the Holy Spirit. You disobeyed God.
God. It's against God. They're sinning against God. They're sinning against God's church. So God responds because it's not necessarily church discipline as opposed to divine judgment. And this is nothing new. And anytime there's a new period of salvation in history or a new era in history, God has a more severe response. And what I mean by that is, think about it like after the tabernacle is put up, what happens to Nadab and Abihu? Nadab and Abihu for presenting false fire. They're killed. Leviticus 10. After Israel enters the promised land in Joshua 7, Achan is killed for disobeying, right? We see time and time again that there's these examples of God being more severe for specific purposes. I mean, even the golden calf at Sinai, God comes down, he just gives the commands. It's a new era where the Mosaic law has been given. He acts swiftly and severely because he's setting an example and he's setting the tone.
And that's that's also an example of him using Israel to judge Israel. What does he tell to the Levites?
Tells them to
draw their swords,
and kill them.
kill them.
Yeah. Yep. So I think what we see theologically from this, judgment. It's policing your own program. It's judgment early prevents judgment later, harsher judgment later. Yeah. And he's trying to shape and mold the church to be the body of Jesus on earth. It can't afford to be corrupted. It's Christ's presence in the early world. I mean, that needs to be preserved. So I think it makes sense that God takes divine action. Anything that you have on that? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, ultimately, like, if you see anything like that going on in your church, if you see any kind of, religious hypocrisy or stealing or people using their power to justify, bad things, that's absolutely not okay. You shouldn't be okay with that. And you shouldn't let that happen. When we see things like that in church and we leave our church or we let that continue to happen, all that does is give that a bigger platform to grow. And, I would recommend, not leaving the church, but, help make your church better. If you see that things like that going on, you should absolutely do your best to put a stop to it before you just leave
say
the church.
Something. That's where we see Matthew 18. Like if someone's in sin, you go and you approach them and you talk to them. And if they're unrepentant, you bring someone else that's a valid witness or someone that understands the situation. And if they're still unrepentant, that's when you go to church leadership. And you're right. I think Christians, this is something for us to learn as well. It's not just the unbeliever that maybe sees this passage and has a misconception about God and about church, about, he just smites people dead. But it's also for the Christian. If God is not okay with the church becoming corrupt and hypocritical, then neither should we. And if God is going to divinely judge the hypocritical within the church, I think Paul, remember what he says about in Corinthians, I believe, when he says, it's not those outside the body that we are judged, it's those inside the body. Yeah. So I think a lot of times we as Christians, I know it's easy for me to just create an us versus them mentality and all the problems are out there in the world, but ultimately it's the problems are here inside of me. Yeah. It's my own hypocritical nature, and it's in our own body.
That's another thing that I think gets misconstrued too, and kind of controversial is oh, you're a Christian, doesn't God tell you not to judge? No, we are, we're not supposed, if I was to judge somebody for doing something that I am also doing, that's hypocritical.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me a religious hypocrite. But if I see something wrong, I'm absolutely allowed to tell that person that, hey, that is wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. And, we need to make this better.
Yeah. And I think actually, that kind of leads into the last controversial passage we're going to go to, being able to tell someone something is wrong and it not be hateful, it's still loving to be able to tell someone that something is sin. And so really good. We just looked at Ananias and Sapphira. If you go back and look at that story on your own time, Acts chapter 5, verses 1 through 11, read that, read it. So what's the last passage that you wanted to talk about as far as controversial?
Yeah, last and, probably most controversial topic so far is
possibly
1 Corinthians chapter 6 and specifically verse 9. It talks about, do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor homosexuals, nor thieves, nor greedy, nor the habitually drunk, nor the verbal abusers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God.
Man, so why is that set of passages controversial?
Well,
although there's a lot there,
I think it's a very big thing in today's society. We have hookup culture, we have LGBTQ, which are both very big things, and a lot of people they don't like it when you present that as being wrong. But ultimately, I think that the Bible makes it very clear and it's something that we need to understand better and study.
Yeah.
And see why is it that, it's not necessarily hate, but it's denying yourself, like, Jesus says that, you got to deny yourself. You got to pick up your cross and follow me. We're not allowed to just do everything that we want to do.
And I think that's worth noting, before we even look at like the wording behind this and looking at why we can biblically know for certain and with certainty that homosexuality is a sin. I think it's worth noting that, it's interesting that in what you just read, that homosexuality seems to be in our culture the thing that's controversial about this. When this passage has a whole list of sin outside of just homosexuality. So I think that's worth noting is that, if you're watching this, I think a lot of times you might have heard that passage, but I want you to be careful when you hear people quote that passage, make sure they're quoting all of it. Make sure they're actually reading it in context, and make sure they're not just painting homosexuality as some sexual sin that the Bible gangs up on and picks on, because that's not the case. In fact, the rest of this chapter has everything to do with sexual immorality as a whole. So I do think that's worth highlighting. But yeah, like, what do you want to highlight as far as this passage and exploring it as to how we can actually view it?
Yeah, so I just want to explain it better, specifically when it comes to the topic of homosexuality and when he talks about men having sex with men, and I think it's something that a lot of people, they do try to justify. They'll say, oh, well, the Bible, it actually doesn't talk about that. It's actually talking about pedophilia, or it's talking about male prostitution.
I've heard that a lot.
Yeah. And, I saw Wes Huff explain it really well.
Shout out Wes Huff.
Yeah. And, he actually gets into the Greek and Hebrew. I do not know Greek and Hebrew.
Yeah, Greek is Greek to me. Yeah. We're not Greek experts.
I'll do my best. But yeah, he basically, the Greek words that he uses there for men who have sex with men is he uses ute malakoi, ute arsidikoitai. And
what a tongue twister.
Yeah. And basically what Paul is doing here is when he uses those words, he's playing on the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, right? The Septuagint. And he's playing on that translation of Leviticus 18:22, where it says, you shall not lie with a male as you lie with a woman.
Male koitai.
Yeah. And so, yeah, from that word arsin koitai, that it's a compound word. The first word we get is arsin, which gives us the prefix male, and then koitai. It's actually where we get the Old English term coitus, which, is kind of like to have sex.
To lie with in bed in a sexual context.
Koitai, it literally translates to lie with in bed, but not just to go to sleep. It's a sexual thing. It's, to lie with, to go to have sex. And then we see the word malakoi, which it literally translates to soft man. But when we see malakoi in, ancient Near Eastern texts and whatnot, we mainly see it in, Greco-Roman medical texts. They describe it as a medical condition. It's men who effeminate themselves specifically to attract male sex partners. And, I'll just to be clear, it was considered, homosexuality was considered a medical condition for thousands of years up until the last couple hundred years.
Not just in our culture, but also
not
in
just
other
in
cultures.
America. Yeah. But yeah, so when he's using these words together, we're seeing that it's two consensual adult men, one being, effeminate, attracting his partner, and the other one, giving into that temptation and, doing it.
So it's participatory, it's consensual, it's willing, male to male sexual behavior.
Yeah.
And I think again, it's easy for people outside the church or who aren't Christians to see the texts in the Bible, like in 1 Corinthians 6:9, and think that it's ganging up or highlighting just homosexuality. But ultimately, God calls us to an allegiance with Jesus, to carry our cross, to take every thought captive. So that requires, both for the homosexual and the heterosexual, a commitment to dying to ourselves, a commitment to saying, the thing that I want, the thing that I feel and desire, as much as I desire it, I want to desire Jesus even more. And so like the division that Jesus says he came to bring, right, in Matthew chapter 10, that's not just for families, that's for our desires too. Yeah. He's coming to divide ourselves away from the very thing in which sometimes we want the most. And that's hard for us in our culture to understand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was going to bring that up too. Like in Matthew chapter 10, he says it's a hard life, this is what you're going to face. And, in America today, like we live in such a secular, hedonistic society where I think like the main topic on everybody's mind is, oh, if it feels good, then I'm going to do it.
Yep.
And
Disney culture, follow your heart.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, the Bible tells us to look away from that, to deny ourselves and pick up our cross. And, it's one of those things that we see like, oh, like you're not supposed to be judgmental. You're supposed to love your neighbor. And I think that ultimately, if we truly love our neighbor as ourselves, we wouldn't want our neighbor or ourselves to indulge in that kind of sin.
Agreed. Yeah, and whether that's like, and that's the thing. It's like if we see someone we know that we love behaving in a way that we believe God has identified as sin, we should go to that person and say, "Hey, I love you. Can we have a conversation?" And it's not you going to that person saying, "This is my own standard in which I'm judging you by, but this is what I see God saying, and that's why that concerns me." And I think we need to be willing to be humble enough. Like as a Christian man, I want to be humble enough to where if you or someone else in my life came to me and said, "Hey, like I don't think what you're doing is right," or "I think this might be sin," or "This concerns me," or "This is what God says," and I see this in, I would want to have the humility to be open to that. I'd want to have the humility to say, okay, maybe my life is not in perfect alignment with all of God's will. And that's the beauty of truth. That's the beauty of God's word, is that it actually gives us and presents us the opportunity to make changes. The point of Bible study, the point of time in God's word is to see God's life, to see my life, to see how they don't line up, and then try to align them with the help of Jesus, the help of the Holy Spirit.
I think even more so today too, like I think every year it gets, more so and more so like, oh yeah, like more, hedonistic, more secular. And, we're raised thinking that, anything that we like to do, like, it's all okay. We're raising our children, teaching them that it's okay. And ultimately, like, this is what caused nations to get punished in the Old Testament, is that they would not turn away from these ways. They would raise their children, doing these practices, and
compromising
the cycle
truth
continues.
Yep.
And, like, I think you brought up Matthew 18 earlier, but I think Matthew 18 is a great example. Matthew 18 verse 6, when he says, but whoever causes one of these little ones to fall into sin, it would be better that a millstone be hung around their neck and they'd be drowned in the depths of the sea. Like, he's saying it would literally be better for you to die right now than grow up and, indulge in sin, because that's going to separate you from me forever. Yeah.
And not only indulge in sin growing up, but to promote it in a way that teaches and convinces and persuades people that certain sin is okay. Yeah. And like what Jesus is saying is not necessarily pertaining to homosexuality, but we do live in a culture in which we've compromised truth, and we've compromised, it's because of our sexual freedom culture, a culture that says, I should have sexual freedom by exploring whatever sexual desires that I have. What that has done is actually led us to a lot of sexual suffering, sexual trauma, sexual shame, sexual confusion, and that's why we have the identity crisis that we have. And so in a lot of ways, our idea for freedom or sexual freedom has not been all that it turned out to be, that we thought it would be. And God actually might be right that a specific design, a sexual design and parameter that's within the marriage confines that God has for us might be better for us, might be something that's for our good.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like think about it, like, we're all like, we're born and we grow up. We're all born with a full brain, a full digestive system, a full body, but we all have half a reproductive system. It's because, we fit together. The Bible says, a man shall leave his father and mother and be united with his wife, and they shall become one flesh. we were made to go together.
Yep.
And I think that we see, and to kind of spin it back to the other topic that you had about Ananias and Sapphira, like we're letting this kind of thing corrupt the church too. Like we're seeing, churches being taken over and promoting this kind of thing. Oh, this isn't really sin. You're allowed to do this. God actually says it's okay to do stuff like this. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that we shouldn't be okay with, and we should try to educate people better on that.
And a lot of times that's out of fear. It's out of a desire to make sure that people like us or that people aren't upset with us. We oftentimes fear judgment or rejection from man more than we fear judgment or rejection from God. And that's a hard thing to talk about, but I think it's true.
Yeah, and I also think that, not everybody who does this is inherently evil. I think that there's a lot of people who truly do want to follow God, and they want to do it, but they don't really want to give up what they find, pleasurable, and they want to say what can I do to prove to myself that God actually allows me to do this,
Yeah.
And just to be there's a lot of things that I wish that weren't in the Bible too, that would make my life a whole lot easier.
And see, that's what I think is we have to clarify here what we're talking about. We are not saying that God is going to send someone to hell because of same-sex attraction or desire. Homosexuality is not just a desire that you have. It's as we talked about in the Greek, explicitly in the Bible, it is same-sex activity and behavior. And so you're right. There are people who desire Jesus so badly. I have friends who have same-sex attraction, but they submit to Jesus. They carry their cross. They deny themselves. They understand that they have a part of themselves that it's a part of their journey, but they don't identify themselves according to their attraction. I think the temptation in our society is, well, if I'm same-sex attraction, maybe that makes me gay, or maybe that makes me homosexual. But really, we're disciples of Jesus first. I'm nothing else before I'm a disciple of Jesus. And I think, my friends who, the same way they have to carry their cross with their same-sex attractions, those of us who are heterosexual or have opposite gender attractions, we have to carry our cross as well. We can't just do whatever we want sexually. We can't just do whatever we want according to how we want, because we want. That's our idea of freedom in our country, but ultimately that is not freedom biblically at all. Go ahead. What else you got on that?
One last thing. Like I said, there's a lot of things in the Bible that that scare me a lot, that I wish that weren't in there, that make my life harder.
For sure.
And I think that, Mark Twain said it best. There's a Mark Twain quote when he says, "It's not the parts of the Bible that I don't understand that scare me. It's the parts of the Bible that I do understand that scare me." And I think that that's the biggest thing. The more that we read and really, truly understand the Bible, we see, just like in Matthew chapter 10, Jesus he's pointing it out for us. He's saying, it's a hard life. You're going to be hated. You're going to be persecuted. But that's the cost of being my disciple.
Yeah. Wow. There's so much that we just got to talk about on this episode. I mean, all the way from, 1 Corinthians 6:9 and sexual immorality and homosexuality. We looked at Ananias and Sapphira and early corruption in the first century with the early church. We looked at Old Testament war texts and conquest of Canaanite, the Canaan conquest, and is God a moral monster? Is it ethnic genocide, or is it justified? And how do we explain that? And then we... what else did we look at? We looked at the example of Jesus coming not to bring just peace, but also division, even when it's very difficult, or it draws us away from those we love most. Man, please, if you're watching this, spend time in these places in the Bible on your own time. You'll always get more out of your time with God one-on-one than you'll ever get from us on a podcast. But if you're watching this video, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, turn on all notifications. We're almost at 200 subscribers. So please share with a friend, subscribe if you haven't. Believe it or not, majority of people that watch our videos in our channel are not subscribed to the channel. So subscribe if you have not. Thank you for watching. And until next time, God bless.